the mask is finally off. After years of crying about privacy and media intrusion, Meghan Markle and Prince Harry have just exposed themselves as nothing more than high-end influencers willing to shill for Disney. Tom Bower, the investigative biographer who wrote the explosive tell-all Revenge, has just dropped bombshells that prove everything the Sussexes claimed about wanting a quiet life was complete fiction. Harry returns from his recent solo trip to New York. And what's the first thing he does? He immediately starts promoting Disney and his trip to Disney World. Not a quiet family moment. Not stepping back from the spotlight, but full-blown commercial promotion. Bower calls it exactly what it is, saying Harry showed he is very commercially minded, which makes it impossible for him to ever return to royal duties. But here's where it gets absolutely jaw-dropping. Sources close to the situation reveal that this Disney deal isn't just some innocent family partnership. This is Meghan and Harry pivoting into full influencer mode, and Bower suggests they're being paid handsomely for these promotional posts. The same couple who sued newspapers for invasion of privacy are now voluntarily broadcasting their every move for corporate sponsors. The hypocrisy is staggering. Remember when they claimed they wanted to step back from royal duties to protect their family's privacy? Well, that narrative just crumbled faster than their Netflix deals. Bower points out that Harry wants his cake and eat it, but the royal family isn't buying it anymore. Prince William reportedly wouldn't allow Harry back into the fold. And frankly, who can blame him? What makes this even more shocking is the timing. Just as their other ventures are allegedly failing, suddenly they're everywhere promoting Disney products like desperate influencers trying to pay the bills. It's like watching someone who once dined at five-star restaurants suddenly doing commercials for fast food. The desperation is palpable, and industry insiders are taking notice. This Disney deal represents something much darker than just a career pivot. It's proof that everything Meghan and Harry told us about their motivations was carefully crafted public relations nonsense. They never wanted privacy. They wanted control. They never wanted to step back. They wanted to cash in. And now that the royal protection and prestige are gone, we're seeing what they really are underneath all that carefully managed image. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. What Tom Bower reveals next about their financial situation will shock you to your core. And it explains exactly why they're suddenly willing to promote anything that pays. Tom Bower just delivered the most devastating revelation yet, and it's going to send shockwaves through Montecito. Meghan Markle has no real income anymore and is facing what Bower calls a major problem. The woman who once commanded millions for Netflix deals and Spotify contracts is allegedly running out of money and fast. The signs have been there all along if you knew where to look. Bower reveals that the Netflix series is over. There's no great podcast. They don't generate any money. Think about that for a moment. The couple who left the royal family claiming they needed financial independence are now scrambling to find their next paycheck. The irony is almost too perfect. But here's where it gets really telling. Remember last year when Meghan skipped Kevin Costner's charity event for emergency workers? Bower explained she didn't want to appear cheap or give anything for free while she was promoting her Netflix series. Fast forward to this year and suddenly she's desperate to be seen anywhere that will have her. She showed up to the same event she snubbed, wearing $300,000 worth of jewelry, including Diana's Cartier watch. The desperation is written all over every public appearance. Bower notes how Meghan turned up to Costner's event this year because she is desperate to be seen. When someone who once considered charity appearances beneath her is now showing up hand in hand, you know the financial pressure is real. The woman who allegedly refused free publicity is now begging for any spotlight she can get. Industry insiders whisper that their commercial deals are declining rapidly. Harry has reportedly lost his charity Senegal in Africa, and even Invictus Games is seeing important people leave. When your own charitable organizations start distancing themselves, that's not just a financial problem. That's a reputation crisis that makes you untouchable for future deals. The timing of their Disney promotion makes perfect sense. Now, when you're facing a financial crisis, you take whatever paying gigs come your way. Bower suggests they're getting paid for this Disney content, and frankly, they probably need every penny. The couple who once turned down commercial opportunities as beneath their royal status are now essentially Instagram influencers with fancy titles. What's even more shocking is how quickly this financial house of cards collapsed. Just a few years ago, they were reportedly commanding massive deals worth hundreds of millions. Now they're allegedly struggling to maintain their lavish Montecito lifestyle, while their earning potential evaporates faster than their royal connections. But the financial crisis is just the beginning. The next revelation about Harry's desperate attempt to change his family's surname will show you just how far they've fallen from grace. Hold on to your seats because what Tom Bower reveals next will leave you speechless. In a move so desperate it's almost unbelievable, Prince Harry allegedly approached his uncle Earl Spencer with an outrageous request. He wanted permission to legally change his family's surname from Mountbatten Windsor to Spencer, and the rejection he received was absolutely brutal. This bombshell revelation comes straight from Bower's upcoming book, and it exposes just how far Meghan and Harry were willing to go to distance themselves from the royal family while still clinging to royal connections. The audacity is breathtaking. Harry essentially wanted to dump his father's name while keeping a link to his deceased mother's aristocratic lineage. According to Bauer, this surname change request happened while they were filming their Netflix series. But here's where it gets really twisted. Meghan allegedly didn't like the surname Mountbatten-Windsor. Remember in her lifestyle series when she told a friend that her surname isn't Markle, but Sussex? She was apparently desperate to completely rebrand the family, and Spencer sounded much more marketable than Mountbatten-Windsor. Earl Spencer's response was swift and devastating. He told them no under no circumstances, right to their faces. Bauer speculates that Charles Spencer probably doesn't think the marriage will last forever and simply didn't want his family name associated with Meghan in the event of a divorce. Smart man considering how this story is unfolding. But there's an even darker layer to this surname obsession. Bauer reveals something that will make your skin crawl. In Meghan's mind, she is Diana. The entire Spencer name grab wasn't just about distancing from Charles. It was about Meghan literally trying to become Diana Spencer. She wanted to inherit what Bauer calls the glow of her dead mother-in-law. Think about how calculated this really was. If Meghan had secured the Spencer name, she could continue playing Diana 2.0. Even if she and Harry separated, the royal sparkle would remain intact. The Diana connection would be permanent, and she'd have the aristocratic surname to back up her delusions of grandeur. It's manipulative on a level that's almost hard to comprehend. Wherever Meghan appears now, whether it's at Kevin Costner's event in Colombia or Nigeria, Bauer notes that her publicist always reveals she's wearing one of Diana's pieces of jewelry. She's desperately trying to maintain that Diana connection, because it's literally all she has left in terms of royal credibility. The Spencer family saw right through this scheme. They understood that allowing Meghan to use their name would be giving her permanent access to Diana's legacy, regardless of what happened to her marriage. Earl Spencer protected his family's reputation by refusing to let it be commercialized by someone who clearly had ulterior motives. But this surname rejection is just the beginning of Meghan's delusional behavior. What Tom Bauer reveals next about her Diana complex will show you just how far she's willing to go to live in a fantasy. What Tom Bauer reveals next is so disturbing it's hard to believe, but the evidence is everywhere if you know what to look for. Meghan Markle genuinely believes she is Princess Diana, not that she's similar to Diana, not that she's inspired by Diana, but that she literally is Diana reincarnated. The level of delusion is staggering. Bauer puts it bluntly. In Meghan's mind, she is Diana. This isn't just about wearing Diana's jewelry or drawing comparisons. This is about a woman who has completely convinced herself that she inherited Diana's role, Diana's importance, and Diana's right to global adoration. The fantasy has become her reality. The Australia trip in 2018 was the turning point where this delusion solidified. Bauer explains that Meghan believed she was as important to the monarchy as Princess Diana, and the cheering crowds only reinforced this twisted self-perception. But here's what she fundamentally misunderstood about those crowds. They weren't cheering for Meghan Markle, the actress. They were cheering for what she represented as a working royal. Bauer makes this crystal clear. When she was cheered as a working royal, it wasn't because she was Meghan Markle. It was because she represented British royalty and all the values of the Queen, and all the tradition and 1,000 years of history. The crowds were cheering the institution, not the individual. But Meghan's narcissism couldn't process that distinction. The comparison between Meghan and Diana is laughable when you examine the facts. Diana had amazing status. She looked beautiful, she had terrific poise. She worked very hard at being a royal. She was very empathetic. Diana spent day after day in hospices and hospitals with sick people, working tirelessly for charitable causes. Meanwhile, Bauer notes that Meghan would never go and spend day after day in hospices and hospitals and with the poor. She only wanted to go and party with Elton John in the south of France. But the most disturbing part is how Harry enabled this delusion. The more Harry drew parallels between Meghan and his mother, the more convinced Meghan became of her own importance. Harry completely misunderstood his own mother, who he obviously barely knew, and didn't realize that Diana was herself a manipulative and determined woman. He projected his fantasy version of Diana onto Meghan, and she ran with it. Now, we're seeing the consequences of this delusion playing out in real time. Every public appearance features Diana's jewelry. Every photo opportunity is calculated to evoke Diana comparisons. Meghan is desperately trying to maintain a connection to someone she never met, whose life she fundamentally misunderstands, and whose legacy she's actively damaging with her behavior. The Diana complex explains so much of Meghan's erratic behavior. She expected instant global love because she believed she inherited Diana's popularity. She couldn't understand why she had to work for public affection when in her mind she was essentially Diana returned from the dead to save the monarchy. But this delusional thinking led to catastrophic decisions that destroyed relationships and burned bridges. The next revelation shows exactly how Meghan's judgment and sense of superiority alienated the people who should have been Harry's lifelong support system. What happened during one weekend at Sandringham in 2017 was so shocking that Harry's friends were literally texting each other, "Harry must be nuts." Tom Bauer reveals the devastating details of how Meghan systematically alienated every single one of Harry's lifelong friends in what can only be described as a calculated social massacre. This wasn't just awkward small talk or cultural differences. This was Meghan positioning herself as the morality police, challenging anyone whose conversations clashed with her values and taking issue with jokes about sexism and feminism. Keep in mind, these were Harry's closest friends, people who had known him since childhood, gathering for what should have been a fun shooting weekend. Harry's friends reportedly felt that Meghan repeatedly reprimanded them and called her a real dampener of the party. The woman who would later try to teach us how to entertain on Netflix was apparently such a buzzkill that grown men were questioning their friend's sanity via text message. The irony is almost too perfect. But here's where it gets truly sinister. Bauer reveals that this weekend was a decisive moment where Meghan essentially gave Harry an ultimatum. Dump all your friends. And shockingly, Harry complied. None of those people at his shooting weekend were invited to the dinner after the wedding. She successfully separated him from his entire support system in one fell swoop. The cultural clash was inevitable, but Meghan's response was telling. These friends were preparing for a traditional shooting weekend, oiling their guns on Friday evening as part of the social fabric of country life in Britain. When Meghan told Harry, "You can't shoot anymore," she wasn't just attacking a hobby. She was rejecting an entire way of life that connected Harry to his heritage and his friendships. Bauer explains that shooting isn't just getting the birds. It's all part of the social fabric of country life in Britain. Meghan couldn't understand that she wasn't just marrying Harry. She was supposed to be integrating into a community, a culture, and a way of life. Instead, she positioned herself as morally superior to everyone around her. The friends Harry lost that weekend now reportedly refuse to speak to him. They're in despair and furious with his behavior. Think about that for a moment. These weren't casual acquaintances. These were people who cared about Harry enough to be concerned about his choice in partners, and now they won't even take his calls. What makes this even more hypocritical is Meghan's selective moral outrage. She could judge Harry's friends for their jokes and their lifestyle. But she had no problem taking their titles, their traditions, and their social status when it benefited her. She wanted all the perks of marrying into this world while rejecting the people and customs that created it. This friends massacre reveals Meghan's true character. She didn't want to integrate. She wanted to isolate Harry and remake him in her image. The woman who preaches about compassion and understanding showed none of those qualities when dealing with people who didn't immediately bow to her worldview. But Meghan's destructive influence on Harry's relationships extends far beyond his friend group. What Tom Bauer reveals next about Harry's planned documentary will show you just how far he's fallen from the man his friends once knew. They monetized a dead woman's memory before she was even cold in the ground. What Tom Bauer reveals about Harry's planned Princess Diana documentary exposes the most callous commercialization yet, and it proves that nothing is sacred when there's money to be made. Bauer's verdict on Harry's documentary plans is devastating. It would be totally inaccurate and a shocking act of further disloyalty to his family. The man who barely knew his mother wants to rewrite her story for profit. And the audacity is breathtaking. Here's the brutal truth nobody wants to acknowledge. Harry was 11 years old when Diana died. He was away at school living in a boarding school bubble while his mother navigated the most complex period of her life. His understanding of Diana comes from childhood memories, media mythology, and his own psychological need to turn her into a saint. As Bauer puts it, Harry obviously barely knew his mother, yet somehow thinks he's qualified to tell her definitive story. The inaccuracies in Harry's basic understanding are staggering. In his own memoir, he admits believing for years that his mother had simply disappeared, later convinced she was murdered by paparazzi. Bauer calls this ridiculous, pointing out that Diana died because she was in a speeding car with a drunken driver, not wearing a safety belt. If Harry can't even get the fundamental facts of his mother's death right, how can he be trusted with her complex life story? But here's where Harry's victim narrative completely crumbles. He portrays Diana as helpless prey for the media when the reality was completely opposite. Diana was a master of media manipulation who collaborated firstly with Morton in his book, and then she collaborated in a Panorama interview. She repeatedly chose journalists and fed them information when it served her purposes. Bauer reveals that Diana wasn't some innocent victim being stalked by photographers. She was a huge influencer, huge manipulator of the media who understood exactly how to use publicity as a weapon and a tool. The woman Harry wants to memorialize as a media victim was actually playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. This documentary would inevitably be filtered through Harry's grief, surrounded by, yes, people who won't challenge his sanitized version of events. The result would be a commercialized fairy tale that serves Harry's emotional needs rather than historical truth. Diana deserves better than being turned into a martyr saint for her son's financial benefit. Bauer suspects the documentary motivation is purely financial, saying it would be made for money. The same pattern emerges again, using royal tragedy for commercial gain while positioning himself as a grieving son just trying to honor his mother's memory. The timing makes this even more offensive. If Harry genuinely wanted reconciliation with his family, this documentary would infuriate his brother and represent the ultimate betrayal of his father. You can't have it both ways, demanding to return to the royal fold while simultaneously profiting off family pain. What's most disturbing is how this fits the broader pattern of commercializing every aspect of royal connection. Nothing is off limits, not even a mother's death, if there's profit potential. But even this documentary scheme pales beside the next revelation about how they monetized their own daughter's name. They registered a website to profit off their daughter's name before they even had the decency to tell the Queen what they'd chosen to call her. What Tom Bower reveals about the Libet domain registration exposes the most commercially driven, disrespectful move in Sussex history, and it proves that literally nothing is sacred when there's money to be made. Harry's daughter was born at Santa Barbara's Cottage Hospital on June 4th, but the birth wasn't announced until 2 days later. In those crucial 48 hours between birth and public announcement, Meghan's lawyers were busy registering Libet.com. Think about that timeline. They prioritized securing commercial web domains over informing the Queen that her great-granddaughter had been born. The sequence of events is absolutely damning. Birth happens on June 4th. Lawyers register the website, and only then does Harry call his grandmother to announce both the birth and their decision to name the child Libet. The commercial infrastructure was in place before the royal family even knew the child existed. It's breathtakingly calculated. But here's where the story gets even more explosive. According to Bower, Harry's version of events is completely false. Harry claimed he called the Queen and asked for permission to use the name Libet and that she approved. The palace was so outraged by this lie that they took the unprecedented step of calling the BBC royal correspondent to set the record straight. The palace told the BBC that Harry didn't ask for permission. He announced it as a done deal. When the BBC reported this truth, Harry's London lawyers threatened them with defamation lawsuits unless they apologized and paid damages. But here's the kicker. The palace told the BBC, "Don't you apologize at all. What we've told you is the truth." Harry was forced to withdraw his legal threats because everyone knew he was lying. Bower reveals this was pure commercialization inspired by Meghan, because Harry hasn't got a commercial strand in his body. Harry might have been clueless about the business implications, but Meghan understood exactly what they were doing. They were monetizing the Queen's pet name, the most intimate nickname used by the monarch's closest family members. The domain registration represents something far more sinister than just business planning. It shows that every single decision, including naming their daughter, was filtered through a commercial lens. They turned a great-grandmother's private nickname into a potential revenue stream before the child was even announced to the world. This wasn't some spontaneous gesture of love for the Queen. This was a calculated business move disguised as family sentiment. They knew the Libet name would generate massive media attention and commercial opportunities, so they secured the digital real estate before anyone else could claim it. The disrespect to the Queen is staggering. Here's a 95-year-old woman who had just lost her husband of 73 years, and her own great-grandchild's birth announcement was treated as a business launch. The commercial priorities came before basic family courtesy, and that tells you everything about where their values really lie. But the Elizabeth scandal was just the warm-up act. The next revelation about how Meghan burned bridges with the fashion industry elite will show you why her commercial prospects are collapsing faster than anyone expected. She burned the biggest bridge in fashion, and now Edward Enninful won't even return her calls. What Tom Bower reveals about Meghan's controlling behavior with British Vogue exposes why A-list editors are now treating her like radioactive waste, and it explains her desperate scramble for any media attention she can get. The British Vogue September issue in 2019 was the biggest-selling issue in the magazine's history, and Meghan convinced herself she was the editor. Bower reveals that over 7 months, Meghan persuaded herself she was editing the issue. While the actual editorial team showed silent exasperation with her controlling behavior, she wasn't a guest editor. She was a nightmare client who thought she owned the magazine. But the real fallout came 3 years later when Meghan appeared at a charity event in Manchester and demanded the cover story for Vogue. She didn't just want to be featured. She wanted control of the content when Enninful already had a cover planned and refused to give her editorial control. Meghan allegedly had a meltdown that ended their professional relationship forever. Bower's assessment of Enninful's recent response about featuring Meghan is devastating. When asked if he'd work with her again for his new magazine, Enninful paused before saying, "Meghan and I had a great moment with the issue we did, but I feel like I have done it, and I wouldn't necessarily repeat myself." In fashion industry speak, that's a brutal rejection delivered with British politeness. The pattern repeats itself everywhere Meghan goes. Sam Cashner from Vanity Fair, who wrote the original Glowing Wild about Harry piece, later said he felt manipulated and betrayed and felt played orchestrated after working with her. When your early supporters start using words like manipulated and betrayed, you've burned bridges that can never be rebuilt. What makes this even more damaging is how Meghan responds to criticism. When Bower's book revealed unflattering details about her behavior, including quotes from Cashner, Meghan's legal team allegedly pressured Cashner so intensely that he tried to backtrack his statements. Bower calls this the Sussex war machine and describes how Meghan, when she puts on pressure with all her lawyers and all the rest of it, is a terrifying machine. The media landscape has fundamentally shifted against her. Bauer notes that women journalists, especially in Britain, make their fortune by deriding everything she does. Columns in major newspapers are now devoted to ridiculing Meghan Markle, and once that smell of ridicule touches you, it's nearly impossible to remove. Industry insiders are now treating her as toxic. The Hollywood Reporter was pretty rude about her. Vanity Fair delivered a devastating profile, and even publications that were once friendly are keeping their distance. When fashion editors and entertainment journalists start avoiding you, your commercial prospects evaporate overnight. The control obsession that destroyed these relationships is still evident today. Meghan only works with outlets she can manipulate, like People magazine, which has become what Bauer calls a glorified Sussex press release outlet. When you're reduced to working only with publications that will print exactly what you want without questions, you've lost all credibility with serious media. But Meghan's media manipulation goes far deeper than just demanding editorial control. What Tom Bauer exposes next about her lies to Oprah Winfrey will show you why she can never again play the victim card. 17 lies in one interview destroyed her credibility forever. What Tom Bauer reveals about the Oprah Winfrey disaster proves that Meghan can never again play the victim card because everyone now knows she's willing to fabricate stories for sympathy and revenge. The Oprah interview was Meghan's nuclear option designed to destroy the royal family's reputation while positioning herself as the innocent victim of institutional racism. But when fact-checkers got their hands on the transcript, they found 17 separate inaccuracies that completely undermined her credibility. 17 times she either lied outright or twisted the truth beyond recognition. The most damaging lie was about her secret wedding. Meghan claimed she and Harry were married 3 days before the public ceremony in St. George's Chapel with just the Archbishop of Canterbury present. This was complete fiction. There was no secret wedding, no private ceremony, just a couple rehearsing their vows. But Meghan presented it as fact to make their public wedding seem like a performance rather than their real marriage. Then there was the racist conversation about Archie's skin color that allegedly prevented him from getting police protection. Bauer calls this lies because police protection has nothing to do with skin color and everything to do with official royal status. Meghan weaponized racism allegations to explain security decisions that were actually based on protocol and Harry's position in the line of succession. The "no one asked me if I'm okay" tearful moment from the Tom Bradby interview was pure manipulation. Meghan painted herself as completely isolated and unsupported when in reality she had rejected help and advice from multiple palace staff who tried to assist her transition into royal life. She turned support into neglect and guidance into oppression. But here's what makes the Oprah lies even more sinister. Bauer reveals that Meghan caused huge damage to Britain's reputation around the world and still do. The racism allegations weren't just personal attacks on the royal family. They were diplomatic disasters that damaged Britain's international standing. Meghan weaponized America's racial history against the British monarchy for personal revenge. The inaccuracies weren't mistakes or misunderstandings. They were calculated deceptions designed to maximize sympathy while inflicting maximum damage. When the palace stayed silent initially, it looked like confirmation. When they finally responded with recollections may vary, it was too late. The damage was done globally before the truth could catch up. Bauer notes that once these 17 inaccuracies emerged, her credibility sank and she suddenly realized she couldn't anymore play on emotion in that way. The victim playbook that worked so effectively in the Oprah interview became useless once people understood she was willing to lie for sympathy. That's why Meghan doesn't do TV interviews anymore the same way. When she appeared at the Time 100 interview, it was so contrived, so meaningless because she was terrified of being fact-checked again. She learned that vulnerability only works if people believe you're telling the truth. The palace initially tried to handle this privately, but Meghan's public lies forced them to break their usual silence. When someone accuses your institution of racism on global television, using fabricated evidence, staying quiet becomes complicity. The palace had to defend itself, even if it meant contradicting a family member publicly. But all these revelations pale in comparison to what Tom Bauer predicts will happen next. The final section reveals why this might be the beginning of the end for everything Meghan and Harry have built. We are witnessing the final act of the Sussex saga, and Tom Bauer's predictions paint a picture of inevitable collapse that will leave even their most dedicated supporters speechless. The identity crisis is here. The money is running out and the world is watching to see how this spectacular fall from grace finally ends. Bauer delivers his most chilling assessment yet. They've got a real identity crisis, which will be resolved in the next few months one way or another. And I don't think it can be to the good. The timeline is accelerating. The pressure is mounting and something has to give. When an investigative journalist who has spent years studying their behavior says the resolution can't be good, you know we're approaching the endgame. The signs of desperation are everywhere now. Meghan showing up to events she previously snubbed, Harry taking any commercial deal that pays. Both of them reduced to Disney promotions like desperate influencers trying to make rent. Bauer notes they only travel where it's free because they can't afford the hundreds of thousands it would cost for their usual luxury trips. When former royals are counting pennies for travel, the fall is nearly complete. But here's the most devastating prediction of all. Bauer suggests we might be looking at a separation, saying everyone is just waiting for how she's going to treat Harry. Will she dump him? The marriage that was supposed to modernize the monarchy might not survive its own commercial failures and public humiliation. The business model has completely collapsed. Their charitable organization Arctwalk is not a charity. It's a commercial organization that gives away very little money because they haven't got much money in the pot. Compared to billionaires who donate hundreds of millions, they give away a few thousand. And even that amount is diminishing. When your charity becomes a vanity project because you can't afford real philanthropy, the writing is on the wall. The victimhood narrative that once generated sympathy and commercial opportunities has been completely played out. Bauer notes that no one is going to listen anymore to them bleating about being racist.